Hi everyone, welcome back to our education series, Learn to Earn. In the first module, we discussed cycles, and if you haven't seen the first one about cycles, please, I do recommend you watch that one first so you can understand what cycles are in relations to these charts that I'm showing and how these turning points will actually play into that. And for those here for the second lesson, let's kind of get down into it. Turning points are more than just where price turns, but within a cycle, turning points have a specific role and a slot they all go into. On my chart here, you will see, yes, 10 different numbers, all in sequential order, but where they land is actually the most important part because they reliably land in the same regions or zones, as I like to call them, every single week or every single chart down to from the 30-second or lower all the way up to a yearly or monthly chart, right? All within a given cycle. So what we see here labeled in red at the very top, that is the turning point 10 range, followed by 1, 2, all the way down to 10 again. 10 has a very fluid um, turning point zone where it can land in the back half of the end of the previous cycle to up until the first half of the new cycle in quadrant 1. Where turning point 1 lands, it's always within the first quadrant of the new cycle. Okay. Now there are more kind of specific zones where they have a higher tendency, but I do recommend charting these and collecting and doing your own research and finding whatever asset you are trading, what its tendency is, because each market has their own tendency and their own rhythm that they move to, but they all still obey the same exact rules. Turning point 2 is usually found at the second half of the first quadrant of the new cycle. Here, I marked out the cycle with very dark black lines, one in the front, one at the very end, and the dotted lines just separate the quadrants. Okay? At this point, let's not look too far into the orange lines in the background. That's something to kind of go into at the next step. Turning point 3. Now, turning point 3 is usually second half of the first quadrant to first front half of the second quadrant. Where 4 lands is anywhere within the second quadrant. Okay? But as it can sometimes go right over, it is more rare than it is reliable. It's usually in that in the middle of that second quadrant. 5, 5 is fluid, kind of like 10, where it can land anywhere between the second half of the second quadrant to the first half of the third quadrant. But a good way to remember is 5 is always in the middle of a cycle. 6 is kind of like 4, where it always is in that third quadrant. Now, again, each chart is a little different, but I do find 6 is sometimes usually around the middle of that cycle. Now you have 7. 7 is kind of like 5, but it plays more like a late turning point 3, in meaning it is usually straddling that border between the third and fourth quadrant, but it can kind of come in early or a little bit late, and there's a certain way to identify when a turn comes in, but we're going to get into that later. 8, 8 is, you see here highlighted in pink, 8 can be just a little early into that at the end of that third quadrant, but you usually find it in the front half of the fourth quadrant. And then 9. 9 is kind of like 1. Yes, sure, it can kind of come early in the third quadrant, but it's usually not. It's almost always in the back half of the fourth quadrant, and it always has to come in before the new cycle. And then, of course, you have 10 at the bottom, making its low before it moves on. Okay? I view this much like the game you may see in a magazine or the newspaper called Sudoku, where each turn has a specific place to land. And once it's there, you won't see it in another place, right? The other thing is, how do we get these numbers? Okay. You see 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. All the odd numbers are turning points or pivots from the high, while all the lows are even numbers. Okay. Now, you can take a screenshot of this to kind of remember it, and we're about to get into a couple examples here on the live market. Give you a couple more seconds for a screenshot, and cool, moving on. Here we have Bitcoin. Okay. This is Bitcoin's chart on the weekly or the 32-minute, where it goes from start to finish is exactly 7 days. Okay. Here we'll also see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This example where 8 comes and forms as low just at the end of the third quadrant here, but that is the low. Before you see it goes up, it makes its high. Meanwhile, I think 9 is trying to come in with a turn. Here, 10 is on the border, but remember 10 can land anywhere between here. It chose to go there. 2, this is a great example. Knowing where turns happen can help you even trade and forecast more accurately and more responsibly and help better your risk management so you don't start, you know, FOMOing in on a move. Just like here, if we look at this, at this point, Bitcoin had been falling about 5%, 4.5% over the last 1.5 days, right? One day, 32 minutes, it's dumping. It's starting to fall even more. And you may think, oh, it's time to get in, but you, or once you learn this method, you'll find out that turning point two needs to come in. And this is not the time to just jump into a short. Wait, because it's going to rebound. And it sure did. From its low, it came back up $4,000. This would have given traders a way better chance to either get into a short or get out of a position if they were trying to catch this bottom falling knife, or if you realize, hey, I'm in a long, this isn't working, well, don't close at the bottom. You can always wait till it comes back up, right? 5 again, middle of the quadrant. Even though it was a small move, you see this was the last little move down from 3 to 4, middle of the second quadrant, or towards the end, because 4 has to come in, and then, sure enough, popped up, put its last little high in, and then dropped down to 6. Only one low was found here because this is where 6 comes in. Sure, 8 could come here, a 4 could come in this bottom, but now that we say 4 and 5 both in, 6, pop up to 8, pop up to 7, and that's just how it goes very reliably all the time. Now, this is crypto. Let's see how it can work on something like the NASDAQ. Now, the NASDAQ chart is slightly different because it actually does not move 7 days a week. It is about, what, 5 full days and a half, both on Sunday and a half on Friday. So it's six, about 6 days. What you see here also is kind of the same thing. We have a cycle, and within here you will see the orange lines I drew on the other one. They also show that 5 will be in the middle. 7 came in a little early, along with 6, but then we pushed down to 8. The reason I'm showing this is because in each cycle you have 10 turning points. And with each cycle, you also have, I can just flip this, an average number of turning points, where here we had 3 in this first quadrant, 3 in this next quadrant, but then we had 2 in here, and to average that out, you had another three in the next one. Okay? You weren't going to get another three in that same quadrant. Here's another example. All the turning points all fall within its set border. All fall within its own set, guidelines here. Like I said, very reliably, 7 is in the second half, 5 right in the middle, 3 in the first part of the second quadrant, 1 and 2 always in the first, 6 towards the middle of the third, 8 came in early again, and 9 came in early. But after that, it was no higher, no other high kind of came in because no high can come in until you're in the next cycle, in this case, the next week. All right. And also those lines that I drew in the form of a box, this is just actually another little helpful guide sometimes I give to students to kind of help them as training wheels to kind of show them where things are actually coming and just a better way to kind of forecast or fine tune where things are going. One is usually around this 0.125. I just had these extra lines. These are Fibonacci numbers that go across time-wise, so left to right. 3 is always before the 0.382. 5, always around the 0.5, or 4 will either usually be around this 0.382 over. 6 always comes, of course, after the first half, and usually around the 618. Now, this is also interesting. So 7 is, again, close to 0.75. Easy way to kind of remember it. 8 and 9. 9 is very often around here. We saw an example where it came early, but it still played within its own rules where it has to be in that fourth quadrant. And if, for example, this is 9, then we know turning point 1 cannot come in until we're in the next cycle. All right? So hopefully this found value. If you have any questions about it, please feel free to leave a comment down below. And I'd like to, get a discussion going. I could try to help answer anything that anyone has, and we can definitely keep a discussion going there. But thank you for joining the second module on turning points, and stay tuned to the next one. Thank you.